uh, this webinar. It's a pleasure to be talking to all of you about CAT 2018, and I hope you can all hear me properly here, right? So, the session is about, as you know, the topic of the session is how do you score 99 percentile inside the CAT. That's what the session is all about. And the topic of the session, as you can see, the path to 99 plus percentile in CAT 2018. And I'm going to talk about the Quants and DILR sections, which sections in the exam. And that's what we need to focus on in today's session. Hopefully, by the end of the session, you'll get certain inputs from me about how you should prepare for this exam and what you should do in the next 3 months with respect to your prep process. Now, when I'm talking to you about this process, a couple of things that I'm aware of is maybe some of you are, this group of people who are inside the webinar right now will be divided into two kinds of people. One who are starting fresh, and the others who are maybe a little bit into their prep process already, or some people who might be actually very deep into the prep process. So this session is essentially going to be assuming that you are not a starter for CAT prep, and you are actually already understanding what the whole process is. And then I'll put in my inputs to you with respect to what changes you might want to make to your strategies, to your plans. And of course, it is all going to depend on the execution of plans, whether you can track that 99 percentile or not. But first things first is, as you can see on this slide, the journey to 180 and beyond. And why I say that here is because if you look at CAT and a 99 percentile score, so it is not about it is not about a 99 percentile per se, but you do not focus on your percentile score you get. That's the first thing you do. So what I'm trying to tell you here, talk about the experiences that CAT 2016 or CAT 2017, or even if you go a couple of years behind with the current pattern of the CAT, where you've got 100 questions and the total scale score that you get is out of 300. Why I put this slide as the journey to 180 and beyond is because 180 marks, 180 plus, has always been 99 percentile plus. So if you can guarantee a score of 180 for yourself out of 300, you will be ensuring that you score 99 percentile definitely. And in that context, if you're looking at, let's say, the percentiles that 180 gave you, CAT 2017 had a percentile of around 99.3 at the 180 score. CAT 2060 had a percentile of around 99.85 at the 180 score. If you go back a year earlier, CAT 2015 had a percentile of 99.1 at a 180 plus score. So pretty much getting 180 kind of guarantees your score in this exam. And hence the journey for CAT prep is essentially, as I tell everybody and anybody who cares to listen, and I keep talking to all my students who study with me and the readers who contact me, the journey for CAT is always about getting to that, with the current pattern of course, is about getting to that 180 score. And this has been the way you decode the CAT percentile every time. I mean, whether it has been earlier CATs when CAT used to be 150 questions or 1 mark each. I'm talking about the mid early 2000s, 99, 2000, 2001 year, 2001 kind of years. And if you scored around 65 to 70, a score of 65 to 70, 75 maybe, you would get calls from the best IIMs. You would get your 99 percentile. So it's always about reaching that number that you try to focus on. So the first thing I would like to tell you is to focus on the score, and then when you start focusing on your score, what you need to do starts getting clarified. So if I'm assuming that there are 3 students, A, B, and C, let's say A is getting a 75 to 80 percentile, B is scoring a 90 percentile. Let's talk about 4 students. C is scoring a 95 percentile, and D is scoring a 99 percentile. So based on the evidence of CAT 17 and CAT 16, as I've already mentioned, this was a score of 180, which means that per section you needed to average 60 marks each. 95, 96 percentile in CAT 17 was at around 140 marks, which means per section, and 90 percentile would have been at around 110 to 120, which means you would need to average around 38 marks per section. And if your average comes down to 30 marks per section, you get a score of 90 with 30 marks per section. You end up coming down to a 75 to 80 percentile. So journey, how you can move yourselves to the right of this axis, how fast and how quickly you can move yourself to the right of this horizontal, on this horizontal line. And you realize that if you're talking about, let's say, if you now break this down to the next level, and rather than talking about the score, let's say as we assume that A, B, C, D are all 4 people who are solving questions with around 10% errors, 10 to 15% errors, which is the maximum you should do. If you're doing more than that, you'll get a huge penalty on your scores. So if you now break this journey of these numbers into attempts and corrects, the numbers start changing to something like 12 with around one incorrect. So corrects, attempts and incorrects, let's say. So 12 to 13 attempts with 1 to 2 incorrect gives you a 90 percentile, 75 to 80 percentile. It leads to a score of 90, of around 90, which leads you to that percentile. To get a 38, as you can calculate, you need around 15 questions with 2 incorrects, approximately, maybe 15 to 16, with around 2 to 3 incorrects. To get a score of 140, which means 47 per section, you need around 18 attempts with 2 incorrects. And to get a score of 60, you need around 21, 22 attempts with error of around maybe 1 to 2, or maybe you can increase the attempts to 23, and you can go up to two errors maybe. So this is the dynamics or the brass tacks of how you score the 90 percentile. So what you'll see is that the people who land up here would have on an average attempted around 65 questions, 60 to 70 questions, depending on their error percentages. And they would have made maybe 5 to 6 errors in that. And if you then is then deconstructed pretty easily into a very simple thought process, that if I'm attempting 13 questions in a section, versus if I'm attempting 16 questions in a section. If I call a move from 75 to 80 as one quantum shift, 90 to 95 is another quantum shift, and 95 to 99 is a third quantum shift. And then you analyze what do you need. Yes, there is only two questions more per section, 2 to 3 questions more per section, and you get that shift. And I often ask people this question, that if you can solve 17, why can't you solve 20? What do you do in your preparation? What mistakes do you make in your preparation that your solving is limited to 20? Because I have a strong belief that if your prep cycle is organized correctly, you will automatically get your marks as you require. So coming back to where we were, the pattern of the exam, as we all know, currently is about QA, DILR, and verbal ability and reading comprehension. And you have 34 questions an hour. That slide is wrong. It should say 32 questions in 1 hour in data interpretation and logical reasoning, and 34 questions in 1 hour in reading comprehension. So you have 100 questions totally overall. And I've already talked to you about the 16 and 17 percentile scores. So the challenge of CAT prep is essentially to show you yourself how to score 60 in each of the three sections. And since today's session is about quants, DI and LR, my focus will be on the journey. I mean, what do you do in your prep journey so that you can actually hit that 60 plus scores in each of the sections, right? And in that context, I'll go back to a screen share and go back to my paint window to explain one more thing to you. Now, if you look around yourself and you look at the CAT prep journey people undertake across the country, I see this happening. That in their CAT prep journey, what people do is they spend between 4 to 6 months, 4 to 6 months doing the basics. So in the CAT prep journey, people spend between 4 to 6 months of the time that they have doing the basics and familiarizing themselves with every chapter in maths and with every question type in DILR and verbal. QA has chapters, DILR and verbal only has question types. So what people do across the country is that they spend 4 to 6 months, and I would want all of you to hold your questions for some time right now because I'll take questions towards the end of the session. Let me complete what I have to say, and then we'll try to see as many questions as we can accommodate, and which are relevant to everybody in the group. I'll try to answer those. So what people do is they spend 4 to 6 months doing this what can be described as the basics of prep. Now this journey, whether you undertake this journey or not, and if some of you are starting late for the CAT 18, then I tell people this thing, that this journey is just preparing yourself for battle. What is the main battle that you have in your CAT prep journey? The main battle that you have in your CAT prep journey is when you hit the dialectic between taking tests, coming back to the drawing board, sorting an issue out. You come back to the drawing board to sort out specific issues that you have identified inside the test. And then you go back to the tests. Right? So this dialectic between the test and the work on the drawing board and coming back is, I personally believe, the most precious part of the CAT prep journey, because it is here that you're solving the problem of what score you're getting, what score you're hitting in your tests, and how do you take it to 180. This part is unfortunately just preparing you for the main battle, which is where this is. And unfortunately, what I see across the country, people overemphasize this part. And at the cost of underemphasis on this part of the journey. And if you understand, if you need to know what I'm saying, and if you want to understand what I'm trying to say, just try to look at how people prepare for the CAT. Just go out and go into any college across India. Go to a St. Xavier college Calcutta. Go to a Shahid Bhagat Singh Delhi. Go to any college, any normal college. When you go there, you'll realize that people who are preparing for the CAT are doing 70 to 80% work of what they do. So if they spend 500 hours preparing, they'll spend 400 hours of the preparation doing this part. And they only spend 20% of their time in this dialectic, which I'm saying is the most important part of your test process, of your prep process. You go to an IIT where you will see that all people, all the toppers, etc., coming out of. You'll find 599.9 percentile. Go there and you try to analyze what they do in the prep process. You'll realize that they are not doing this at all. Them are doing it. If they're doing it, they're doing just 20% of their work on this, and 80% of the work is here. And I don't understand the reason why people don't understand this aspect, but across my experience, I see a lot of people having this issue of trying to avoid getting into a test, because finding your score inside the test, maybe it causes some heartache for you. But it's better to find out what's happening and then sort the issue. So what I tell people is that this dialectic between testing and the drawing board is something that you should be executing for a minimum of 3 to 4 months. So the difference between this prep and the prep cycles that you would typically undergo if you are going one chapter at a time, the difference between these two is that what you are doing here is that in this dialectic, you are essentially solving issues. So I'm not saying that people who just do this or focus on this, because they do, but what they do is they parallelly do both things. So I'm taking my test. I realize that I am having a problem with the functions chapter in maths. I come back to the drawing board. That week, I spent 15-20 hours solving functions. I spent 15-20 hours reading up on functions. And then when I come back to my next test 1 week later, at that time, I'm better at this. Right? So please understand this, that if you're going through the CAT, the quants part, let's say, as you can see, the quants part is about 6 blocks as detailed in my books. The quants part is 6 parts as detailed in my books. And the moment you look at these 6 parts, first part is number systems progressions, the second part is average allegations. Like allegation is again misspelled. Here it should be ALLI, because that is not the typical allegation. I think somebody ran a spell check on my file before they put me up on this webinar, and that's how it happened. But anyway, that's not your concern. So block 3 is percentage, ratio, proportion, time and work, time, speed, distance. Also has the chapters of profit and loss and interests. Block 4 is geometry mensuration. Also has the chapter of coordinate geometry. Block 5 is functions, inequalities, logs, quadratics. I guess a lot of you are anyway reading my books, so you know what these chapters are and these blocks are. But when you're preparing, what is the preparation objective? When you're studying, let's say you're studying block 5, functions, inequalities, logs, and quadratic. What is your preparation objective when you're studying this topic? So you're studying, let's say you're studying functions, inequalities, logs, and equations, including quadratic equations. So this block 5, you might, as you start off, be a poor solver of block 5. You might be an average solver of block 5. You might be a above average solver. You might be a good solver, or you might be a great solver of the area. And if you belong to these two categories, then this area is helping you get through the exam. But if you belong to the lower categories, then this area is blocking you from getting through the exam. And your prep objective, it's very important to define what your prep objective is, because if your objective is not clear, you will end up doing things which might not be fruitful for you. So prep objective is there's only a single point prep objective of any prep strategy for the CAT in every area in maths and in every question type in DI, LR or verbal. The objective is to upgrade your solving skills. The objective is to upgrade yourself from the lower part of the spectrum to the higher part of the spectrum. And there's a certain process that will do that for you. So for instance, if I'm a poor solver, let's say, of these areas, I should go through the concepts first, but then 90% of the learning that you will have will be inside questions. %90 of the learning you will have in CAT prep will be inside questions. And hence, the ability to extract learning out of questions becomes your most powerful ally in your CAT prep process. So, at this point, a small question for you, and I'm looking for answers for this. As soon as I show this question, I would look for answers which you will have to put on the Q&A part, because I'm going to look at only at the Q&A part. I'm not looking at the chats here. So whoever gets an answer to this question first, I believe McGraw has a small signed book from my side for that. And this is your question. So I'm going to give you a minute or so to answer this question. And I'll just go with the simple algorithm that whoever gives me the first answer. will qualify for that signed book from my side. You'll have to put the answer in the Q&A part of of your window, not on the chat. Right, I've got the answer from some people. So I leave McGraw to decide the winner on this based on the chat logs and the timing of when the answers have come. Right, and they'll inform the relevant answer for you. Now, there's a special reason why I picked up this question to discuss in today's session. Right, so the question is a CAT 17 question, and as some of you are very correctly giving me the answer, but I'll have to explain this to others. The question is talking about it should say A less than equal to B again, right? So I guess I want a modification of the answer for the question on the screen. So I think only Vikash has given me the right answer to this question as it appears on the screen. Yes, Jain and Lakshit Kumar also, right? And Raju also. So I'll allow McGraw to decide that with respect to the timings, because I don't want to spend my time in the webinar on trying to decide on the timings of who send it when. But if you look at this question, the question appeared in CAT 18 and CAT 17, and why I picked up this question is for a special reason. That if you look at this question, it is giving us a situation where it is talking about the number of solutions, and it's in the context. I'm showing you these two questions in the context that you need to understand that 90% of the learning, whether it's QA, DI, or LR, whichever area you're looking at, 90% of the learning is going to happen inside questions. Right? And to show you the most efficient way to solve this question, let me show you the triggers or the reactions inside this question. So the first reaction in this question, based on the slide that we have, is that since AB are natural numbers, which are such that A is less than B, so you realize that we are talking about the equation given to us is 1 by A plus 1 by B equals 1 by 9. And when you do this thing and you realize that both AB are positive, the first thing you understand is that you have a positive quantity plus another positive quantity, which is equal to 1 by 9. Please remember, this is a CAT 2017 question. So you have two positive quantities which are equal to 1 by 9, which means must individually be less than 1 by 9. And if both are going to be individually less than 1 by 9, both AB should be more than 9. So when you start your trial and error for this equation, your first value for A that you'll put, and the other trigger given to you in the question is A is less than B. So the other trigger given to you in the question is A is less than B. So you'll start at 10 for A, B as a natural number or not. So now please that the differential between any quantum jump of scores in a section, if you're moving from 7580 to 8590 to 90 to 95 plus to 99 plus, the differential at any point is not more than 3 to 4 questions. So when you reach this question inside the cat, 3 events of you being able to solve a question like this takes you closer to the next percentile level, and 3 events of not being able to solve a question like this will start putting you back on the lower spectrum of this percentile range. And hence, when you reach a question inside the exam, the critical aspect that starts working raises its head for you. The critical aspect that raises its head for you is how do you react, or how do you react so that you ensure you get an answer. So the first reaction in this question was that you have a positive quantity plus a positive quantity equals 1 by 9. So hence you have decided that the value of A will start from 10. That's a decision you take pretty early in this question, right? The value of A is 1 by 10, start from 10. And then the issue then becomes, since the question is asking you for number of AB pairs, the issue then that arises is that if I'm taking A as 10, do I get B as a natural number? The constraint in the problem, remember, was AB are natural numbers. So once I put A as 10, do I end up getting B as a natural number? So you have two ways to think here. One way to think here is that if I put A as 10, this value is 0.1, and then the right hand side plus this, the right hand side 1 by 9 is 0.1111. So the addition in the next fraction is 0.0111, which you should know as 1 by 90. So you should be able to trace with A as 10, you should be able to trace the value of B as 90 immediately. But that process will not work further, because when you start putting A as 11 and 12, you will not be able to see whether this is going to come out of an integer or not in the 1 by B form. Hence, the better way to do this, of course, is a small algebraic transformation, where what you do is you say that, okay, 1 by A, I want to see whether B is a integer or not. So what I do is 1 by B is equal to 1 by 9 minus 1 by A. I do this transformation, and then I realize that 1 by B is equal to A minus 9 upon 9A. And then I realize that B should be 9A upon A minus 9, and this value should be an integer. So with this transformation, this problem becomes much easier, because then as you start checking for A, when you put A as 10, you will get 90 divided by 1, you will get B as 90. When you put A as 11, you will get B as 9 into 11 by 2, which is not a integer. So 11 is not a solution for A. When you put A as 12, you will get B as 9 into 12 by 3, which is giving you 36. So you get 1090 and 1236 as two options. And then when you go for 13, you get B as 9 into 13 upon 4, which is not an integer. You can check that 14, 15, 16 and 17 will not give you integers, and at the last value at which you will get an integer will be if you put a as 18. In that case, this problem becomes 9 into 18, 9a upon 9, 18 minus 9, and this cancels out. You get b also as 18. But the question I put on the screen, in that the question says a less than b. So in that case, 18 and 18 will not be a solution you will take. But if the question was what Cat had asked, a less than equal to b, then you realize that this is the last solution. Right? Now, why did I pick up this question? There's a special reason why I picked up this question. So as you saw, if you went through these steps, if these are your first 3 steps in the exam, and they should have been, you would have got the attempt here. The essential logic is that the difference between a person who makes 13 attempts, 16 attempts, 18, 19 attempts, and 22 to 24 attempts, the difference between these 4 people is basically that when they read questions, all of them, maybe these people read a little bit more number of questions than these people. That's one there, but that number is not so different. Maybe it's just a difference of 2 or 3. But suppose they're all reading around 27, 28 questions. For A, he is able to attempt only 1 and 2. For D, he is able to attempt 3 and 4. So A's average is 2 and 4, and D's average is 3 and 4. And if you look for similar averages for B, it's 4 out of 7, which will essentially mean around 57%. So his average will be around 2.28 out of 4, and C's average may be around 2.4 out of 4, 2.4, 2.5 out of 4, and hence the differential is only in that one question for every set of 4 questions. So somehow your prep process has to tell you these three steps in this question, right? So you need to have discovered these 3 steps before you go into the exam, because inside the exam, this might not strike you. Okay, I should do it this way, because if you're trying to do it for the first time, you'll make mistakes. You'll go in the wrong directions. See, it's like you go to a new city and you hire a bike and you start riding it. So your first the first cut you take on the road might not be the right one that you need to go where you want to be. And hence that's similar in the exam. And you're solving in this fashion where you are groping inside the question. Your first reactions might not be the right ones. And that's when you start losing out. Now, have a look at. Now, why did I show you this question? Is my question to people always is that how do you ensure that you learn these things during your prep process? So, somebody going for CAT 17, and if he had not done or not pre-planned or pre-programmed this process, he or she would have had a problem doing this. It's not something natural. It's not like 2 plus 2 is 4 that you do this, and that specific transformation that are left on the board there, right? The reason I picked up this question is because of this second question here. Try to think of this. No, in this case, Chirag, it was not compulsory. So, as I said, there's a special reason why I decided on this question. Let's look at this other question and let's see what this question is forcing us to do. I'll go back to my screen share. I'll go back to my paint window, and we'll go back to this point. where we pick up the question 1 by n plus 4 by n is equal to 1 by 12. Mn are positive integers, natural numbers, and n is an odd integer less than 60. This is the information given to us. So we have this equation 1 by n plus 4 by n equals 1 by 12. Mn is odd, Mn are natural, and Mn is odd less than 60. Now I just want you to see the parallelism between these two questions and the solving process. So when you look at this question, 1 by n plus 4 by n is equal to 1 by 12, Mn are natural numbers, n is odd less than 60. The first thing you realize that we are in a positive plus positive situation. And that should add up to 1 by 12. So naturally, both these values should be less than 1 by 12 each. And if 4 by n has to be less than 1 by 12, n should be greater than 48. Because if you put n as 47, 4 by 47 will be greater than 1 by 12. And to that, if you add this limit that n is odd and less than 60, you realize that n can only have 6 values. N can only have 6 values. 49, 51, 53, 55, 57, 59, on which you need to check whether m comes out to be an integer. So this step is pretty much similar to your step in this question here, where you took the value of a as 10 to start with. Very, very similar, isn't it? And then you realize that, okay, now that I have got 6 possible values frozen for the value of n, for the value of n, I need to check at these 6 values whether m turns out to be an integer or not. And again, like in the previous question, I had an option of putting 10 in this equation and trying to see whether b comes out as an integer. But as we realized, this transformation makes a lot of sense because it will help our checking and will make the checking more efficient. As we say that, okay, I want m to be an integer, so I'll leave m on this side of the equation. And that ends up as n minus 48 upon 12n as 1 by m. And then if you invert it, you will get m is equal to 12n. And you see this question is eliciting question. Right? Somebody who went for CAT 17 should have pre-programmed this process in a situation like this, because that's what CAT prep is all about. Now the question does arise, where does he get, or where does he get this opportunity to pre-program this? And to your utter surprise, you should know this. This was a CAT 2007 question. So even this very specific transformation, CAT is not asking for the first time. And this is the truth about all the solving areas. The QA, the DI, and the LR. In all the three areas, which are the solving areas, the verbal is not a solving area because it's more about a reactive area. You don't pick up a pen, paper and solve something. You read a question and you react to it. In these three solving areas, it's about standardizing the steps you will take to solve a question. It's about standardizing specific steps in questions which will not come to you through theory. No book in any theory lecture can teach you, or no teacher in a theory lecture will teach you that the common sense that when you have an equation which you see on the left hand side of the screen and the right hand side of the screen, your reaction to both, and you have a situation where you're talking about integral solutions, the reaction to both have to be exactly the same. But somehow for CAT, understanding these steps during a prep journey becomes very critical. And hence, as I always tell my students, coming back to the objective uh, of your, as I said, whether you're talking about quants, the 6 blocks, or the data interpretation and the logical reasoning part of your DILR section, since these are all solving areas, the focus has to be to identify situations or spots problems are going to put you under, and identify the standard operating procedure to get out of it. CAT is completely about common sense if you work this way. And I always tell my students, and this is something that I want you to take away with. See, if your solving skills are poor in an area, let's say your solving skills are not good in DI, or your solving skills are not good in let's say, number systems and quants. Blockwise, if you go back to the blocks, blockwise, if I do 200 questions in a block, my solving skills are bound to improve. And I've seen people preparing for the exam for 6 months and without raising their solving skills. What I'm trying to say here is that at any point of time, if I as a student get down to solve 200 questions on a block, my solving skills are bound to improve, especially if I take the learning approach with the questions rather than the ticking approach with the question. The ticking approach is I'm trying to get through the question so that I get rid of the question. The learning approach is that I start thinking about the question, I rotate it inside my mind, I allow it to germinate its thoughts inside my mind, and I allow it to enrich me with the learnings I should have from that question. The moment you start doing that, 200 questions in any area, and you should realize, if my solving skills in an area is poor, suppose my solving skills in geometry is poor, all I need is 200 relevant questions. My books provide you those. I need 200 relevant questions on which I need to germinate my thinking. And the moment I do that, my solving skills will have jumped at least 2 levels. So the numbers are blockwise 200. In a chapter you want solving skills improvement, it's 100 questions. 200 questions can be done in 4 days. So if I'm a poor solver of, let's say, block 3, I can become an average solver of block 3 in 4 days flat. I'll not become a great solver, but I can move up to the average solver level in 4 days flat. Another 4 days, and not just, and these 4 days are not about 20-hour days. These could be 4-hour 4 days. 4 hours sitting on that area, because for 50 questions you don't need more than that time. Maybe 6 hours, but it's about 20 hours work. And I often tell my students and people who care to listen to me, and I would like to repeat this for you, is why do you look at your prep in terms of months, years, weeks? Why can't you look at your prep in terms of the number of hours and the relevant work you need to do? So in a month, if you're going to sleep for 240 hours, while you're sleeping, you're not getting closer to CAT. You just need to define your journey in terms of how many hours do you need to work. Keep yourself accountable for every study session. Individual study sessions should enrich your mind. If it's not doing it, that means you are not getting closer to cracking this exam. Please remember one thing, and in this context, the approach with which people take up questions is something which I don't agree with. So I know this for a fact that when you are sitting down, you sit down at 9 o'clock in the night, you decide on a 3 hour study session. And you decide on the 3 hour study session, when you pick up a question and you come across the question which you can't solve, the first sign of trouble you just straight away go to the solutions. Is the approach which is not recommended, because that is a ticking approach. You're solving the question. You're not solving the question for the sake of understanding how to solve the question. And hence, if you just read a solution or somebody has told you the solution, you'll not be able to do it in the exam. Try it on driving a car. If somebody tells you how to drive a car and you sit on behind the seat of the driver, you'll not be able to drive it just because somebody has told you how to do it. So maths is about doing, DI is about doing, LR is about doing. And I have a fundamental difference of opinion with the entire country on this issue. That when you have trouble inside a question, you have to start allowing that question to seep into your mind. Give it the time. And I tell everybody who cares to listen, I tell all my students all the time that it's not about, if you don't listen to me, let's say. If I'm saying Arun Sharma is saying this, don't agree to that. Maybe you have a difference of opinion to me. But you can't have a difference of opinion to Einstein. And if you listen to what Einstein said, when Einstein was asked that how did you as a single individual create so much growth in the in one lifetime that hundreds of years and hundreds of generations of humans had not done. You know his answer? The answer was, I could see more inside problems because I stayed with them longer. And that's something that people don't do. And that is one of the reasons why people don't crack. So I've seen people solve 700 questions on a topic without raising the skill level. So the formula is 200 for a block, 100 for a chapter, 50 for a question type, 25 to 50 for a question type. Let's say in time, speed, distance, your circular arrangement is not circular. Let's say in time, speed, distance, your circular. The formula is 25 questions. 25 questions that challenge you, get through them, your skills will be up. Right? So I hope we have had a good learning experience, because we have and I hope I've been able to give you some inputs which have been different from what you have been thinking. Right? So I'm okay to taking a few questions from you. How to solve questions in DILR comes from Vaibhav, and how to improve DILR. Right? Sanskar, you can buy my books. You can go through them. They have a lot of questions available for them. My books have more than 5,000 questions in each quant, DI, and LR. And I think if you can solve that, the way I write my books, it's all about if you solve that area. Let's say you take up averages, LOD 1, 2, 3. You do that, level of difficulty 1, 2, 3. You will not find any situation which I have not conceived of inside the exam. You will find something which will be around that, or a subset of it, or maybe an extension of one of those thoughts inside the test. And hence I give that opportunity to throw my books. Right? So when you're talking about data interpretation, the process is DI is a skill based area. It is not a chapter portion based area. So the process is basically you straight away land into the questions and you start working out how to do things right. So initially don't bother with your time. When you're solving your first 100 sets of data interpretation, don't bother about your time. Learn how to get things right. Doing things fast will come automatically. Right? Devanshi, for Mindworks coaching, etc., you can contact the website. This forum is not for that. Yeah, that's a good question, Mayank. Mayank is asking about perfect interval in terms of days to take mock test. So I often tell people that when you start your mock test, you have to plan. Let's first understand how many you should plan. So between 30, 40 minimum. If you can go to 60, 70, that's great, which will mean you'll enroll for at least 2 test series then. But the idea is that if you're going for, let's say, 30, 40 tests, then when you start off, your first 4, 5 weeks can be 1 test per week. And then you intensify it to 2 tests per week, and then you intensify it to 3 tests per week also later. That's how it should be. Okay? Whether you can get 95 plus or why not a 99 plus, Arvind is solving question papers enough to clear 95 plus. You'll have to come back to the drawing board all the time, because there'll be some solving issues in your head, some question types, some situations which you are not able to tackle so well. So the drawing board will be important. RC I'm not talking about today, Vinay, because Meenakshi Upadhyay ma'am will be having a session on 21st, so you can attend it with her. Ours Nagadeshi Sahit is asking important questions. Since I've talked about staying with a problem, he's asking how many hours are advisable to stay with single problem. So 2 things about that. First is you should understand that the problem should be relevant for CAT. There's a lot of problems going around out there, which I try to avoid in my books, where the question is completely irrelevant from the CAT viewpoint because it's completely mathematical. So any algebraic or mathematical question does not appear in the CAT. You'll only have mathematical questions. They will seem mathematical, but they'll be solvable logically. Right? So that's one part of it. Right? The second part is that how much time should you spend? So at a point of time, if you're thinking about a logical question, I don't think you should spend more than 10 minutes thinking about it at a time. So the way I'll do is, let's say I pick up 200 questions. Let's say I'm finding difficult questions in LD2s. So if I pick up 100 questions on a level of difficulty 2, let's say 30 of them got solved easily, but the other 70 I'm struggling with. So I'll give myself a 3-month time frame, and every few days, maybe even every day, I'll come back to 2 questions out of that and try to get through 2 questions in half an hour. Think about that, think through. And if I'm going to ask somebody about that question, I'll not go and ask somebody a question, how do I solve this question? I'll go and ask him, okay, this question, this statement I'm not understanding. Or in this question, I've got these 3 reactions. Now I don't know how to move further. Can you tell me what to do here? So I'll try to identify the point where I'm stuck if I'm taking help also, rather than asking for somebody to give me the solution. Because then what will happen is the programming that should happen in your mind, that the question should enrich your mind with, does not happen. Right? Ramya, you can start preparation whenever you want. Right? Even if you start now, as I told you, you'll have to go through the test and drawing board cycle. You can't spend 6 months doing a portion and then going to that. So you'll need at least 3 months of test and going back. How many you can answer? It depends on where you are and how much you need to do. So ideally, the time will take you to do around 30, 40 tests and the drawing board work. So how much drawing board work you need is something that you need to look at. Right? Shubham says, I've solved around 150 sets in DI, and there are a few more questions in DI. Shubham is also asking how to prepare for DI. So DI is about, these days DI is more on the logical front than the calculative front. So in my book, sections. One is the archives section where you find a lot of logical questions. And the second is the challenges in DI section, which is completely logical. So you will need experience of around 200, 150, 200 logical sets to be able to handle DI of the kind that they are showing. And what happens is, after you do a certain number of requisite sets, your scores stop. You stop finding new situations. You'll keep finding the same situations, right? During mocks, if Mayank is saying he attempts questions, he chooses the right approach, but somehow gets lost. If that's happening, that's basically because you've not practiced getting through to the answer many times. It is just a matter of increasing efficiency of starting the process to ending the process. So efficiency improvement is what the focus has to be. Right? I will not talk about any specific mock tests, etc. here, because that will be a biased comment from my side. So I'm not talking about any brands, etc. Right? So if you have 2 months, 3 months, what option do you have, Banot, Ramaganot? You have to do whatever you have with it. Right? Mock analysis focus on what kind of questions you knew but couldn't solve. Focus on what just a few pointers. We don't have enough time because we'll just take the last couple of questions and wind up. So in mock analysis, try to focus on questions that you knew but could not solve, questions that you knew but went wrong. Why did they go wrong? As Mayank was saying, approach, you get the right approach, but you don't get to the right answer. So why is that happening? Go back to the drawing board, solve those issues. Your scores will automatically start going up. Right? Ideal time for analyzing mock. I think if you take a mock for 3 hours, you should be analyzing it at least for 3 to 4 hours. One part of the analysis is what you did, your decisions. The other part of the analysis is the questions and what they required. LOD3 Amber, you can do for around 8 to 10 chapters. They will be compulsory. Averages is compulsory. Numbers is compulsory. LOD3 ratio proportion you should do. LOD3 time and work you can do. LOD3 then functions you should do. Equations you should do. LOD3 other chapters you can only go to LOD3 in case you require a further jump in your skills. Rahul, it is about your belief. Rahul says I'm able to solve almost every question, but when I take tests, I'm not able to solve questions as much as it's solved in practice. That's because you don't have the belief in yourself. Right? Logical reasoning, Aminullah, is also about similar to DI process. You do around 200 sets on different categories, and you will start realizing that you have experienced almost everything. So I'll wind up here. I hope you enjoyed, and I was able to give you some inputs. Pratik says Hong Kong you have cracked CAT 15 times with a 99 plus percentile. Pratik is always 99.9 plus, 99.97, 96 is my latest, last 2 percentiles. And it's now 18 times. Right? Verbal ability, Shrikant, I'm not talking about today. Shima, ultimately in DI, you'll have to reach a point where you do a question in around 12-14 minutes, the kind of questions which are coming now. If you can do it in 12-14 minutes, you are pretty good, because if you solve the kind of paper that was asked in CAT 17 and CAT 16 DI, if you solve 4 sets, you are pretty much 99 percentile there. Right? Thanks a lot. I hope you enjoyed the session and you got some valuable inputs. The session will be available, and of course, my books are available for all of you to prepare from. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye, everyone.